Hello, I'm Harry Riley. Welcome to Harry's 10-Minute Tales. This is called The Echo Man and is the first of a series of stories about an unlikely adventurer in the service of his country. The Echo Man by Harry Riley. This story is fiction and resemblance to anyone, living or dead, is purely coincidental. Young Professor Victor Adams was bemused as he followed his colleagues into number 10 to meet the Prime Minister. He was among a party of boffins recruited at short notice for a particular task, as yet unspecified. Britain and America had just achieved the satisfactory unconditional surrender of a violent regime, with the avowed intention of world domination. The diminutive and sharp-featured PM marched briskly into the meeting room, escorted by several dark-suited and uniformed personnel, and asked his visitors to be seated. Hamilton Rogers, Secretary of State, was also present, and it was he who did the introductions and set out the agenda for the meeting. A pleasant-looking young female sat by his side to record the minutes. Questions would be taken afterwards. Without too much unnecessary preamble, Hamilton Rogers began, in his somewhat high-pitched and squeaky voice, to illustrate their task. Gentlemen, now victory has been achieved by our newest weapon, namely the dropping of the Teutonian bomb on the city of Namaskura, we need to make a thorough assessment of its impact on the civilian population. The massive devastation of assets brought the enemy to its knees and forced his immediate capitulation. But now the hard work begins. Although possibly strangers to one another, you have each been handpicked because of your special attributes. It falls on your shoulders to go out there and gather data on the after effects of the action. We are all in uncharted territory. As the major town was utterly destroyed, razed to the ground, there is no fixed accommodation for you. So, together with your international colleagues, you will be sleeping in caravans. He waited for the response to his joke, which never came. Brigadier Badger Smythe took his cue from the Prime Minister's impatience and stood up to explain the party would be travelling under his jurisdiction and with full army protection. He gave each of them a prepared list of items they would need and said they would be given 24 hours to return home and collect changes of clothing for the 5-day visit. Take-off by military jet would be Sunday, 0700 hours, and they would be given medical checks and radiation detectors on landing. Several questions were raised, but Victor kept his silence. The meeting broke up, and they each went their separate ways. When not working in the science laboratory and staying at on-site lodgings, Victor lived with his elderly parents on their extensive estate in leafy Oxfordshire. He now went home to study his list and fill a suitcase for the trip. He knew his overbearing mother would be worried sick while he was away, so he made a conscious effort to calm her nerves. She laid into him the minute he announced his mission. How can you come out? They ask you to go out there, in your state of health. The doctor warned us another attack of the fever will kill you. You won't last 5 minutes in that sticky climate. Lord only knows what diseases you'll bring back with you. And what about your poor eyes? You're virtually blind without those bottle bottoms. Calm down, mother. We'll be kitted out with special suits and monitored every hour. Victor had grown up with indifferent health, after being a sickly child with a heart defect. At the outbreak of war he had been declared unfit for military service, but owing to his academic prowess had been recruited at university by National Intelligence for experimental duties. He found he had a flair for scientific research and invention, and this had brought him to the attention of the armaments people. They needed his input for future weapons of mass destruction. It was a very sombre party of British observers who gathered in what had once been a huge auditorium and studied the desert landscape created by the blast. Nobody spoke until the guide pointed to an area of ground with a big stain in the middle. That dark discoloration on the concrete base is where the audience was seated moments before the bomb went off. They were all vaporised, and that is all that remains of their presence on this earth. Victor was horrified. In a daze he left his companions, walked over and knelt on the concrete. Without quite knowing why he did it, he spread both hands, palm down, on the centre of the stain, and took several deep breaths. His puzzled colleagues watched his actions as, still on all fours, he started shaking violently and keeled over in a dead faint. Several of them rushed to his side. As he rolled onto his back they saw his hands. Both were hideously burned, with the flesh on all fingers hanging off. 2 weeks later the consultant wandered into the intensive care unit where Victor Adams lay in bed. He was connected to several machines by various wires and tubes. His face was masked, and his hands were swathed in bandages. A nurse was sitting by his side, and the doctor spoke directly to his patient, asking how he felt now he had returned to the land of the living. Can you uncover my eyes so I can see again? Steady on, old chap, you've been very ill. We nearly lost you, and by rights you should have been a goner. The surgeon chuckled at his own attempts at levity. Victor groaned and asked for a drink. The nurse put a beaker to his mouth, and then the doctor carefully removed the eye mask. His patient's eyes looked unusually clear and bright and stared back at him, hypnotically. The surgeon shook his head in disbelief. Well, they seem okay, quite remarkable. Next he had the nurse carefully removing the bandages from Victor's damaged hands, and they both gasped in amazement at the transformation. Left and right hands were restored to perfection. Over the next few days, Victor Adams underwent several tests. His voice was recorded and played back to him in the presence of his parents. They were delighted. He now had 20/20 vision without glasses and seemed fitter than ever before. However, they were in agreement that his voice had changed. It had gone an octave deeper, and sometimes, when he spoke, there was a strange, unearthly echo. The doctor explained that early on Victor had been talking in his sleep and appeared to be jabbering in a foreign language, several languages in fact. Mrs. Adams butted in that Victor had a nervous stutter and had never learned anything but English. The stutter had now gone. During the following month, as Victor Adams returned home to convalesce, he went swimming in the lake on the home estate. He had never been able to swim before, but he now found he had a liking for outdoor pursuits. He could miraculously play the piano, almost like a concert maestro, and he inquired who had been among the people sadly vaporised in the bomb blast. Eventually, he learned they had been a multi-talented group of heroes at an award ceremony, and he had somehow locked into the echoes of their lives as he touched and absorbed the dust of shattered souls. The British government had already reached the same startling conclusion and decided that Victor Adams was henceforth to be known only as the Echo Man, and to be put to use as a valuable counter-spy. End.